This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor, and Minneapolis is on fire today. In ways both good and bad, the city has effectively shut down in protest of the Trump administration's invasion. Mass walkouts, businesses closed, schools closed, people protesting, even airport workers walked off the job. Now, many have been arrested, and the White House is mocking all of it. But Americans are seeing a massive and powerful statement of defiance. We're going to talk to you about all of that at the top of the show today. But then Democrats this week failed to block a DHS funding bill that would do little to rein in ICE, including the bill that passed would leave intact the agency's warrantless searches and break-ins, as well as the ability of ICE officers to keep using masks in their operations. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is doubling down on his threat to cut off federal funding to blue states. Federal funding that touches almost every aspect of people's lives, in a move with sweeping and unconstitutional implications that is sure to be challenged in the courts. We will tell you about all of that today. And with us later in the program, we have Jonathan Taplin, a writer, film producer, and scholar who had a very provocative piece this week in Rolling Stone. He is the director emeritus of the Annenberg Innovation Lab at the University of Southern California, and also, by the way, the former tour manager for Bob Dylan. Yes, that Bob Dylan. This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the Defiant. We start today, as I noted, with Minnesota and Minneapolis, a city that has been shut down. Today, that city stood up and showed the United States how it's done. Let's take a look.
Several schools canceling classes today because of those bitter temperatures, but the weather, it's not only impacting schools and keeping people home.
Yeah, in fact, many businesses are shutting their doors today to protest immigration enforcement here in the Twin Cities. Leah Bino has more from the newsroom on what's being called an economic blackout today on this Friday. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, that's right. That's the goal, an economic blackout aimed at getting financial attention to the federal government. The list of businesses closing because of the weather and because the state of action continues to grow this morning that we are seeing. We've seen preparations for this mass day of action since last week, many calling for people not to go to work, no school, no shopping. Hundreds have responded at this point. Organizers say they hope this day of action somehow hits ICE specifically financially. The Guthrie Theater has also changed its plans for the evening amid this day of action. The theater originally planned to still open for a few hours for a planned performance, but those plans have now recently changed. The Guthrie will be closed for the entire day, seen in response to the needs of our staff and artists and in support of the broader community. Tonight's performance of Somewhere has now been canceled. Now, in summary, whether you plan to take part in this day of action or not, if you plan on going anywhere, really, a place of business, a place of worship, museums, theaters, check ahead first to see if they are indeed open for today. Back to you guys.
So that day of action is having very, very big results. Hundreds of Minnesota businesses have closed as part of this statewide general strike protesting the Donald Trump administration's immigration crackdown and ICE activity in particular in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Most notably, a large formation of airport workers striking gathered outside of the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. Independent media channel Breakthrough News was on the ground and spoke with one very brave United Airlines worker. Take a look.
We're here at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. There's a walkout of workers right now who are protesting ICE as part of the day of statewide action shutdown. We're here with a worker from Unite Here Local 17. Could you share your name and why you're out here today?
Yeah, my name is Krista Sarak. I'm the president of Unite Here Local 17.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Could you share what are workers doing today and what is the motivation behind today's action?
We're standing up against the occupation of our city and the attack on our members. Our membership is primarily women and immigrants, and people are being abducted from the airport nearly every day. We have more than 15 members that have been wrongfully detained from the airport, and so we're standing up against that.
Yeah, I've heard that those are reports. Can you share more? Definitely, I've seen members' concerns, which is part of the reason why people want to walk out today. But what are the stories? What's happened to those 15 members?
I mean, they're all different stories, but the biggest thing is they're all here legally. They've all passed 10-year background checks. They are not the criminals that this administration is trying to make them out to be. They're just hardworking people trying to provide for their families.
Absolutely. And why an economic shutdown? Why a statewide shutdown as a tactic? I think it's going to be thousands of people today, later. This is just the first action of the day that at least we're at. So I'd love to hear more about the tactic.
I mean, it's been proven time and time again that people in the streets and widespread coalition between organizations is the way to actually get change. So that's what we feel is, we need to start actually doing actions to get ICE out of our cities.
Excellent. And anything else you can share about the 23rd for today that you think people need to know in anticipation for later?
I would just say no shop, no school, no work. Solidarity.
Excellent. Thank you so very much.
And now reports are coming through on those arrested for standing their ground at the airport, including 12 workers. But airport workers were not alone. 100 clergy members were reportedly arrested for kneeling in prayer outside of the airport. That's according to the Washington Post. And we have footage of those arrests. So let's take a look. Now, if facing the prospect of arrest was not enough, this general strike in Minnesota unfolded today amid extreme cold, with wind chills near minus 20 degrees, underscoring the determination of the participants to protest despite the dangerous conditions. Not even Fox News could deny the sheer defiance. Here's what they had to say.
5 corridor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jane. So let's go back to another very, very cold place, but that is not stopping Minneapolis from turning out in huge numbers, in the thousands, we're told, into the streets where it is 10 below this hour.
I don't envy your job right now.
Now, federal officials pushed back sharply on the protests. A Department of Homeland Security official called the strike, quote, beyond insane, while Vice President J.D. Vance blamed far-left agitators and accused state and local leaders of failing to cooperate with federal authorities. More on this with my Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz. Xander, I think it's interesting that DHS says it's beyond insane that people would go protest and use their First Amendment rights, namely because that is something protected in the Constitution of the United States. I guess in the past year, it's become insane to exercise your constitutional rights in defiance of this administration.
Also, how many people need to participate before it is no longer the far left? Like, just on the scale of what's considered, if the half the state is doing it, then it can't be the far left anymore. At a certain point, you have to acknowledge it is just most Americans participating or most Minnesotans participating.
I totally take your point. I mean, I sit here with a defiance hat on, and I'm not on the left side of the political spectrum. And that's where you know that these folks are just grasping, is that you've got an entire state shutting down in protest. And the vice president says, well, it's just far left agitators. Really? I mean, the last time I went through the Midwestern state of Minnesota, it wasn't a bunch of far left agitators. That's not how I would describe the people of Minnesota. They're pretty moderate. And if anything, the state is generally kind of a center-right state. Even though it's gone blue in some elections, it's kind of a center-right culture in Minnesota. Is not a good place for them to have decided to go do this federal immigration crackdown, because it's totally the wrong optics. It is like, look, you think about the president's coalition, there was like white working class blue collar voters all across this state, and they're the ones coming out in mass. Trump voters are coming out and protesting what's happening in their communities.
Yeah, definitionally not the extremists once you get to those numbers. I'm so happy you mentioned how cold it was too, because it's already hard to not work, when you're supposed to go to work, to get civically engaged, to participate in a march. It's hard to get people to turn out for a weekend march. To get people turning out in those numbers at, what'd you say was -20 wind chill?
-20 wind chill.
Yeah, literally miserable, torturous weather that people are showing out. It's super inspiring and lets you know where people are at in that state. And they're at their wits' end. They're not willing to tolerate this anymore.
Yeah, I really think, day after day, the people of Minnesota are showing the rest of the country how it's done. And unfortunately, this isn't going to stop in Minnesota. And whether it's threats of invocation of the Insurrection Act or sending thousands of ICE agents into other places, there are other states now that are in the crosshairs for these mass deployments from the administration. Folks are going to have to learn from the lessons of Minnesota and Minneapolis. And right now, the people of that Midwestern state are teaching us a good one, which is, hey guys, this is how it's done.
Yeah, and it works. And it works. And it works. And people join you, and you can be brave. I saw someone in our comments saying, courage is contagious. Thank you.
Yeah. Courage is also courageous, but
it's also courageous. Definitively, it is courageous. But we've heard that phrase from a bunch of different leaders we've brought on over the last couple of weeks. And you can feel it in those moments. You can feel it. I wanted to get out there. There's no one on my street working right now, but I wanted to get out there after watching that. It's really, really inspiring.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I'll also give a big hat tip to the organizers. I think Sunrise Movement, 50501, Faith in Action, and other groups were behind this. And I think, Xander, we have some of those folks coming on the program next week.
Yeah. We have a bunch of the organizers coming on the program next week. In fact, we were originally supposed to bring Sunrise Movement on today. They were thinking about a student walkout, and the teachers beat them to it. Like, the whole economy shut down, and so They didn't have a student walkout because the teachers were walking out too. And so it's really beautiful to see. I love that, like, the leading, last couple of days, the leading stories have been how the good guys are stepping up. For a while it was just Trump did another thing, and now we're continuously leading with the story about Americans pushing back and being resilient in the face of fascism.
I got to tell you, it's undoubtedly driving him crazy. It is driving the president crazy to see this level of defiance. And we described it yesterday as, water through rocks. Is they're going to keep trying to hold this back, but they can't. The dam of defiance has broken, and that's what we needed to see going into 2026. So that's very exciting. And I'll just say, Xander, before we jump to our next story, this is a reason for folks. If you're not already with us, please like and share and subscribe. If you want our updates, you can get them for free if you go to defiance.org and just sign up for news updates. You also can find us on Substack on our member page at defiance.news, and you can sign up for the free updates. If you want to go a step further, though, if you want to get in on this fight with us and not just fund the coverage of what's happening, but fund real actions to respond to it, then become a member of defiance.org. Already, in response to what ICE is doing, we have done a whole hell of a lot of things. We are one of the biggest funders in America of ICE whistles that you hear in those videos to help communities that are being invaded warn their neighbors about what's happening. We have invested in helping people on the ground. Thousands of people know their rights through Know Their Rights trainings. And we're investing in helping people safely and legally document ICE's abuses so that we can capture those, and that people who break the law, whether they are federal agents or not, are held accountable for doing so. Those are just a few of the things that we are doing. There's a whole bunch more things that we have done and that we're doing to support people on the ground. So join us at defiance.org to take action on these issues that we cover, which leads us to our second story of the day, which relates to two different stories, a tale of two federal funding stories. Let's go to the first one. Yesterday, House Republicans passed a Department of Homeland Security funding bill with decisive help, unfortunately, from 7 Democrats, despite widespread Democratic opposition over ICE's actions in Minneapolis. Notably, DHS funding in that vote was separate from the rest of the government funding package. It passed 220 to 207. The 7 Democrats who voted yes were Henry Cuellar and Vincent Gonzalez of Texas, Jared Golden of Maine, Marie Glussenkamp Perez of Washington, Don Davis of North Carolina, and Laura Gillen and Tom Sozi of New York. Now, most Democrats voted no on that bill, including Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, citing ICE's conduct and a clear lack of accountability from that agency all around this country. Jeffries said ICE is, quote, operating in far too many ways in a lawless fashion, and accused the agency of using taxpayer dollars to inflict brutality. Importantly, a no vote on DHS funding would not have shut down the government immediately. DHS funding does not expire until the end of January, meaning Democrats still had leverage to negotiate guardrails or perhaps force changes faster, but that's not what happened because of those 7 defectors. Separately, the House passed the remaining spending bills needed to avoid a partial government shutdown set for January 31st. Those votes were broader and bipartisan, and that DHS bill now moves to the Senate, where leaders must decide whether to accept it as written, amend it, or delay action as the funding deadline approaches. Now, I would not expect folks to see a whole lot of courage out of the United States Senate, but importantly here, this was one of the few opportunities that Congress had this whole year, 2026, to put a stop to what we are seeing with ICE. This was an opportunity, if Congress had chosen to do it, to tell ICE they're not allowed to engage in warrantless searches. They're not allowed to arrest U.S. citizens without a warrant. They're not allowed to cover their faces during operations and hide themselves from accountability. All of those things were proposed for that bill. Democrats didn't stand up. Some of them capitulated, and Republicans were able to ram that vote through without any additional accountability measures. Now, that's the bad news. Here's the good news. If you didn't read our article this morning, check it out at defiance.news, because the good news is that even though Congress is capitulating to the administration, states and local leaders all around this country are moving forward anyway. There is a mass effort underway from California to New Jersey to pass new state laws and new local ordinances to push back against ICE's lawlessness, including forbidding those federal agents from keeping themselves masked during operations. That tactic that suddenly exploded within the agency in 2025, and which has enabled those agents to evade accountability. So states all around the country are accelerating their efforts to put those bans in place in light of congressional inaction. Now, as select Democrats helped push through that funding for ICE, funding to their own states is being questioned by the White House. This week, the Trump administration has launched a sweeping federal funding review targeting 14 Democratic states and Washington, D.C. All but one of those states voted for Kamala Harris in 2024. Most are led by Democratic governors. Now, the order came through a memo from the Office of Management and Budget obtained by CNN and was sent earlier this week to nearly every single federal agency. And agencies have until Monday to comply. They're being told to report every federal dollar flowing into California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington State, and Washington, D.C. They are to report not just money sent to state governments, but funding awarded to cities and counties and colleges and universities and nonprofit organizations operating inside of them. Everything. Any dollar coming from the federal government to those states, the White House wants to know. Feels a little suspicious, doesn't it? Just wants to know for accounting purposes? No, because the other week, Donald Trump announced to the country that starting February 1st, in just over a week, he intended to cut off federal funding to these Democratic blue states as a deliberate means of punishing them for not complying with his immigration crackdown. That is what the president of the United States is doing. And it need not be said, but I'm going to say it anyway, folks. Whether you are a lawyer or not a lawyer, you don't need to be to know this is illegal. Donald Trump, in plain view, is planning an illegal action to cut off federal funding to states for partisan purposes, for political purposes, for not supporting him and not supporting his immigration agenda. Yes, it is unconstitutional to do that. That is, in part, a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. Just because you live in a blue state doesn't mean your life should be worth less to the federal government than if you live in a red state. But if Donald Trump cuts off funding to your state, it puts you in greater public safety danger. It means you're less likely to get emergency aid. And it means all the services that you pay for from the federal government could be withheld from you because of your political views. Again, illegal, unconstitutional, and the White House seems to be barreling toward it anyway. I want to bring back into the conversation Xander Schultz. Xander, what do you make of this? I don't feel like people understand the significance, which is unfortunate. This is one of those things that's like a Mack truck flying down the highway that's about to crash into a concrete wall, but people are looking at it as it's coming towards them, and they're not looking at what it's headed towards, which is a huge catastrophe. I wonder if we could do more to sound the alarm about how the administration is getting ready to do something truly unprecedented. Oh, you're on mute.
I was on a run like 5 days in a row, not forgetting to go off mute. I've got to start by saying how disappointed I am in Jefferson Schumer. They need to step down. Like I'm just going to say it. They need to step down. Their whole job right now is to whip votes to stop authoritarianism. They need both houses are split on these slim margins. They need 5 Republican votes in the House and 4 Republican votes in the Senate.
So true.
That's your whole job. Get all the Democrats voting on your side to stop authoritarianism. We're not talking about like a challenging policy around healthcare or whatnot, where there's real divisions and theories of change that differ. Find 4 guys in the Senate that will vote with you and 5 guys in the House will vote for you, and make sure every one of those Democrats votes for you. And if you can't do that, step away. No one needs your strongly worded response about how you're against ICE and, they should be defunded. We don't care. You have an inside job right now. Go whip votes. So those guys need to, in my opinion, they need to step down. They've shown to be completely incapable of whipping votes. Secondly, when you're talking about, this car crash, I actually think a lot of people see it coming. Like you and I know this. Our members see it coming. We're doing what we can to see it coming. You talked about a couple important things already. The defense at the state and local level and our local leaders coming together. I just got off the phone with Larry Krasner, who we brought on a few days ago, right before this, and talked about what needs to happen to coordinate the DAs across the country so they're sharing tactics and making joint statements, and America knows their local leaders are fighting for them. So there's more to come there. I don't have something to announce there, but just know those conversations are happening. Local leaders are stepping up, and Defiance is playing a role in that coordination. 2 is the movement leadership that we've seen. On Wednesday, on our next briefing, we have leaders from Sunrise Movement, from Indivisible, and from a couple other orgs joining us to talk about exactly how they're thinking about executing in this next phase, how you win, what needs to happen, how you have the leverage you need. And so I think the people, that are on this stream, this organization in particular, are doing everything we can. We're just not getting help from our folks in DC. That, to your point, unfortunately, there's not that many of these moments where they can put their hand on the scale and change the trajectory of where we're going. And they just missed one of them. They just blew it on one. It's really disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, you don't get to be a leader of a major political party that says fascism is coming to America and there are secret police roaming our streets, and then act like your opportunity to stop it is just another routine vote in the Congress. I mean, there's way too much business as usual behavior in Washington. And I give equal credit to people who are doing the opposite, Xander. I mean, people like Senator Chris Murphy, who in normal times, he's not some radical loony super leftist. Chris Murphy's a moderate guy, but who's been responding to this moment with the urgency that it requires. We're not seeing the same thing out of Democratic leaders the leadership team as we are out of some of their members. So couldn't agree with you more. But I will say this, if elected officials are not going to step up, there's a question. What other parts of society will? And one of the questions that we're going to talk about today is whether there could be a counterculture movement for this moment, whether one's developing before our eyes. And to talk about that today, we welcome the great Jonathan Taplin, a writer, film producer, and scholar who is director emeritus of the Annenberg Innovation Lab at the University of Southern California. And my favorite accolade of Jonathan's is the former tour manager for Bob Dylan and the band. Jonathan, welcome to the program, my friend.
Good to be here, Miles.
It's great to have you. I want to ask you first about that piece you published this week in Rolling Stone. It was an awesome piece, front page, about how in the past, when we fought back against encroachments of power in this country, there was a sort of counterculture against the authoritarianism tendencies. Tell me a little bit about your piece. Are we seeing the inklings of that happening yet or not?
American counterculture starts probably with Thoreau and Emerson in the 1830s and saying, you know, we were declaring war on Mexico. And they said, this is bullshit. You know, this is imperialism. This is exactly what Jefferson warned us against. And then they were also saying slavery has got to end. And this was in 1830, a long time before Abraham Lincoln or anybody else got into the bandwagon. But they did teach Abraham Lincoln what needed to be done. And Lincoln went into the Congress and made an attempt to stop the Mexican War, and obviously became the champion of the anti-slavery movement. In the 1890s, when McKinley invaded Cuba and we took over the Philippines, Mark Twain was the president of the Anti-Imperialist League, and he spent his time working very hard against imperialism. In the 1920s, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, all these people against the kind of Ku Klux Klan right-wing rise of the 20s. And then obviously in the early 1950s, when Joe McCarthy was causing a huge amount of problems, more the kind of stuff that Trump is doing now. You had the Beats, you had the bebop jazz players like Charlie Parker. You had a whole group of writers like Norman Mailer pushing against McCarthy. And then obviously in the 60s, where I come into the story, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Pete Seeger, all these people were early on to the civil rights movement, sang at the March on Washington in '63. There's a picture in the article of Bob Dylan doing a voting rights rally in Greenwood, Mississippi, 30 miles from where Medgar Evers had gotten assassinated 3 weeks before. That's the kind of political courage that artists have always shown in our society. And quite honestly, it's completely missing today. There is nobody seriously standing up, with maybe the exception of Bruce Springsteen and sometimes George Clooney, but they're all old boomers. There's nobody young who's standing up and saying, this has got to stop.
Well, then we see weird stuff like Nicki Minaj sitting at like MAGA gatherings.
Why that's happening.
Yeah.
Jonathan, I wonder,
Miles, I can't hear you.
Oh,
can you hear me, Jonathan?
I'm not hearing either of you.
Audio dilemma.
What's going on here?
Tech support. Tech support. We can hear you. Maybe. You know what? This is new media. Like we're allowed to do troubleshooting. We're allowed to do a little tech support.
Yeah, our fans will give us some grace, our members.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I think a point I wanted to make when he was speaking, the Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson activism he was talking about, Lincoln actually quit Congress over the Mexican-American War. he stepped away from Congress because he was so disgusted by this disconnect between who America said they were and what they were doing. That they are partially credited with creating the Lincoln that we know now historically, who came back, became president, and fought against slavery. And so you never know also like the trickle down effect of that type of art, that activism, that writing, and all the folks it inspires along the way.
I do feel like one of the things Jonathan's hitting on there are some alarming corporate undertones to all of this. Back in the period where folks like Bob Dylan were standing up, they were not as dependent as this interconnected, on this interconnected ecosystem of social media and corporations and the possibility of being crowd canceled. There was the ability to have a little bit more independence. And if your label didn't like it, to say, screw you, go to a different label. But now it just feels like so many celebrities and artists are so terrified about a mean comment in their posts and so terrified and being told, don't touch politics because it's going to be bad for you commercially. And yet, I will say, and I'll be interested to get Jonathan's take on this if he pops back in, is we've seen some inklings of, a counterculture, at least pushing back, or initially there's this group that Jane Fonda runs out of Hollywood called the Committee for the First Amendment, which is a nod to a similarly named committee during McCarthyism in the 1950s that was created of Hollywood types to stand together in an act of collective defiance against the Red Scare. So, we're seeing some of the initial kernels of that, but we'll see what Jonathan has to say. Jonathan, can you hear us?
Now I can. I logged off and came back in.
Fantastic. We said a bunch of nasty things about you, but now you're back. We're only going to say good things about you, brother. No, Xander and I were just talking, and one of the questions that I had for you, and Xander has one as well, is just, do you see any of the early inklings of this that might germinate into a bigger counterculture? Like the example I gave was, Jane Fonda has launched this Committee for the First Amendment with a bunch of celebrities signing on, which is kind of a nod to the thing during the Red Scare, also called the Committee for the First Amendment. Right. I'm hoping things like that can be like a starting point for what you're describing, but I wonder what you think might do it on top of that.
Well, look, I think, it's interesting that the Academy Awards came out this week, the nominations, and the two biggest movies that got the most awards were Sinners and One Battle After Another. And I would argue that both of those are very countercultural movies. They're definitely anti-Trump, anti-white nationalism, and so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
One of the problems that I have is that the music business, and Miles, you and I have talked about this for years, but the music business in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the 90s was basically supported by the sale of recordings. And artists could make a very good living doing that. But when the streamers came in, first Napster and then YouTube and then everything else, the amount of money that an artist gets from their recordings has gone down radically. And that money has been moved from the artists to the owners of the streaming platforms, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and people like that. So what has to happen was that a lot of artists, Snoop Dogg being a classic example, became advertising shills, right? They decided that they would make most of their money from being advertising frontmen. And if your income is all coming from Madison Avenue, they are not interested in you being an activist in any possible way. And you think about a guy like Snoop Dogg, who was part of the whole Public Enemy chronic thing at the beginning of hip hop, which is all fight the power and all of that. And now he's just this funny guy who will sit on the beach and advertise beer or do whatever the hell you want him to sell. He'll sell it for you. And I don't complain for Snoop wanting to make a lot of money, and he does, but he's not going to be able to say anything political at all if that's where his money's coming from.
When you were off the air, Miles had just said
spread out all through the music business. In the 80s, if I had said to Bob Dylan, hey, you should do an advertisement, he would have thrown me out of the room, And now every actor, no actor would do an American ad. They might go to Japan and do a beer commercial, but it had to stay in Japan. Literally, the contract said you can't show this internationally anywhere. But now every actor makes their money off of, advertising. So that's one of the problems. The second problem, obviously, is fear. And you guys talk about that a lot. Clearly, when I cite the example of at the very beginning of people standing up, Edward R. Murrow standing up against Joe McCarthy in the 50s, McCarthy attacked back, and he threatened CBS that he would get their license pulled by the FCC. And Bill Paley, who was chairman and owner of CBS, stood up to him and said, come at me. You're just a blowhard. And you contrast that with the current CBS management or the current ABC management, all of whom knuckled under Trump's threats, which were totally bogus lawsuits. Imagine suing 60 Minutes because they edited an interview. Anybody who knows anything about making documentaries, you shoot about 100 hours for every 1 hour that you end up with. The whole theory of documentaries is editing. And Trump sues them because they edited Kamala Harris's interview. He sues them for $15 million. What do? They paid him. It's insane.
Well, Jonathan, it makes me think of, he sued BBC for $1 billion for this too. And what's so crazy about it is they said, well, BBC edited Donald Trump's speech on January 6th to make it sound like he was inciting violence on Capitol Hill. And I saw that. I was like, he was inciting violence. All you had to do was watch the speech. There's nothing they could have done to edit it to make it worse than it actually was. He was inciting people to go to the nation's capital, to storm the Capitol, to stop the transfer of the election. This is crazy. These outlets have to have the balls to stand up to him.
But it's Orwellian. It is the stuff that truth is false. Everything is turned on its head. And now basically the mass media is totally in the pocket for Trump. You think about what he's done. TikTok just closed the deal yesterday. So now it's under the control of his best friend, Larry Ellison at Oracle. X, totally under control of Elon's best friend. Mark Zuckerberg completely stopped trying to figure out if anything was true or not and just said, I give up. I'm not going to try and control the content. So, he's got most of CBS News run by Barry Weiss. It's totally a right-wing shill job. Fox News. So, basically Trump has managed in 1 year to take over the mass media and put it in his pocket. So it's state media now. And I don't know how people are going to get any kind of honest information if that's the media environment we live in.
Yeah, you made a great point.
So, the solution for me is that young artists have got to start standing up. And I don't know where that's going to come from. My hope is there's a kind of folk music movement called Americana, which feels kind of like the music that I experienced in the early 60s at the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement, which was folk music. It was just a singer and a guitar. And that kind of thing, it's not electronic, it's not made by AI, it's actually real and authentic. Maybe that begins to be the start of this counterculture. But I'm convinced if we don't have a counterculture, we're not going to have a culture.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, I want to ask you about one, and which is, Bad Bunny is going to be at the Super Bowl, and he's one of those artists who has, pushed back. He recently canceled his U.S. tour. I feel like some artists like that, maybe they're going to de-risk this for other celebrities and show them, hey guys, don't be chicken shit. Don't cower in your trailers and go actually do something about it. Do you think there's anything else that might be able to push some of these folks out of their silos?
That's a possibility. I mean, obviously, Bad Bunny suffers from having everything to be translated. And just how that's going to work, we'll see. And how strong he's going to be to stand up, or does he really just want to be a superstar that gets the same advertising revenue that Snoop gets? And that'll be a big question to answer. You know?
Xander, you were going to jump in with one.
Hey, I think Jonathan makes a great point about where the funding. Oh, yeah, you can't hear me?
Miles, can you hear him?
Yeah.
I can hear him, but you can't. We've had that problem before on these streaming platforms. Xander, type me into the chat your question. I don't know what that's about, but if
Miles,
you type that in there,
translate for me.
Yeah.
All right, why don't you take us home, Miles?
What Xander's trying to say is, so Jonathan, I want to ask you, tied to all of this is the fact that we are seeing the types of shocking events that should catalyze something like this. I mean, I watched what happened with Renee Nicole Good this month, and I thought, if ever there was anything that felt like Kent State, it was that moment. And I wonder if you think those catalyzing moments are going to be the type of thing that is the wake-up call, not just for celebrities and influencers, but folks at the grassroots to sort of incentivize that counterculture that we need to see.
Well, you think about it, that in the 60s when Medgar Evers was assassinated, a week later, Bob Dylan wrote a song called Only a Pawn in Their Game, which was about Medgar Evers. And a week after that, he went down to Mississippi, 50 miles from where Medgar Evers had been assassinated, in the threats from the Ku Klux Klan, and sang that song at a voting rights rally organized by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. That's the kind of courage we need. Now, I haven't seen someone write a song about Renee Good, but they should. And look, the irony is that the actual people, not the celebrities, not the artists, are standing up. I mean, when you hear about what's going on in Minneapolis in terms of the local people organizing against ICE, it's pretty bold. It's pretty daring. It's the kind of courage we need. But my experience from the 60s and 70s was that a group of great artists can help coalesce that feeling. So a lot of people feel like I'm not alone. And I'm feeling this thing together with a bunch of other people. And eventually it comes to the place where you all get together in a field in Woodstock and you feel, wow, there's 300,000 of us. And I was there.
Well, Jonathan, for a separate day, we need to have you back just to talk about your experiences at Woodstock. We'll put a trigger warning at the top of the episode and say, we're going to ask for every detail, and I want it. Before we let you go, my friend, I want to ask, since your piece published this week in Rolling Stone, have you had any interesting outreach from folks about it, or any ideas that people have sent your way that you thought, maybe this is something we can do?
Yeah. I've had so much outreach from people who said, how can I get involved in some way of organizing this or supporting young artists to speak up or do what it. So I know there's a lot of desire to do that. I mean, look, my fear is a lot of that, because of my age, is coming from the boomers. And I noticed at the No Kings rallies that a lot of people, at least in LA, were my age. And it's to me like the Zoomers need a courage transplant from the boomers. And I don't know how we're going to do that, but they got to realize that our country's on the line. I mean, this is, as you just said before I came on, this is fascism, and there's no way to color it. It's just what it is, And if what was interesting to me this week was that the Europeans pushed back, and Trump ended up just fumbling and pretending like he got some great deal, which we all know was nothing more than he already had. And it was just, taco. He chickened out. So, I mean, he's slightly, the emperor has no clothes, kind of character. And it may be that in 5 years, we look back at this. I've called this an interregnum. And Gramsci said, the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, many morbid symptoms appear. And it could be that this 10 years of Trumpism is just an interregnum. It's the old is dying, which is obviously the Make America Great Again defines that, right? It's like, I want to go back to the 50s, right? Where white men didn't get any pushback from anybody. But the new can't be born, and the new that's trying to be born is all screwed up. AI controlled by 5 trillionaires is not a future. That's not going to be the future that creates an equal world for us. So it could be, the first time that term interregnum was ever used was for Cromwell. So Cromwell came in 1853 and ruled for 6 years in England, invaded Ireland, and, just killed thousands of people. And eventually they got rid of him. And after he died, he dug his body out of Westminster Abbey and hung his head on a pike in front of Parliament, just saying, that's the end of this bullshit. And out of that came English democracy, the Bill of Rights, all the things that became a way for Parliament to stand up for themselves came out of that interregnum. So it could be we'll look back and think, well, Trump is like Cromwell. It's, we'll look back in 20 years and think, well, that was pretty damn weird, but it didn't last. And I don't think this will.
Well, that's the note of optimism I'm happy to end on, Jonathan. I don't think it will either. And I think you are an example of someone who's lived through a period, seen the gears of history turning, helped turn those gears, and there's lessons to learn from that period in this one. And I think folks are going to rise up and do it. Jonathan Taplin, thank you for joining us today, my friend. We hope to have you back. We'll do that special R-rated segment about your experience at music festivals. We're going to ask you everything. Thank you for being with us, my friend.
Thanks, Miles.
Xander, I'm sorry that we had audio issues with you. I know you had questions that you wanted to ask, but look, I do my best to channel Xander Schultz in those conversations.
It's nice to be back to the world of the speaking. I was trying to emote as best as I could in the intermediate, but it's nice to be back. I had a few thoughts, if you don't mind me sharing, Miles.
Yeah, man.
Coming off that, I think you and him both made a very important point of where people are getting their money from. In the 60s, whether it was the Democratic Party or activists or artists, they were getting their money from high membership, low dollar groups, churches, unions, and in the case of the artists, fans who went to the concert and bought their records and all that stuff. That has shifted tremendously, and it's not only impacted artists, but it's impacted even activists. Most activists are getting money from billionaire philanthropies, like if they're of size, and that does impact how far you can push the envelope, you could say. So he's not wrong in the assessment that leaders, or notable people, were more liberated to say things because they weren't beholden to an elite person or two or three or a company, et cetera. You mentioned that right before the break. I think it's important. to validate. I do disagree with him on the lack of voices. Like you and I have said this a bunch of times. I don't think there's a lack of voices right now. I think there is a lack of synchronization. There's a lack of coordination at a time where it's really, really, really hard. It's really hard. We are decentralized by nature. And so I think there's a lot. I mean, my feed is filled with lots of people across, every different type of talent that are saying they don't like what's going on. They want to push back, et cetera. The reason we stood this up is for coordination. We felt like there was a lack of coordination tying those people together, disseminating through them, et cetera. And so I have to disagree with him there. Lastly, what I agree with him on, though, is the need for a counter vision for the future. What Make America Great Again does do is say, this is where I want it to be. I want our factories to come back. I want white guys to be in charge again, et cetera. And that we have not done a good job. I agree. Like the straight line path is this dystopian, technocratic path that no one really wants to be on either. And we need to share a vision for the future that is hopeful, that is exciting, that it does include everyone in it. And make all, lift all boats. And it is a great project for us. I'll throw this out there just as a starting point. It has never been cheaper or required less labor to produce the food, housing, transportation, and other needs that we have. It's never been cheaper. It's never required less labor. And so trying to paint a future where that floor is guaranteed, where dignified survival is guaranteed, and then we can use that as a springboard for Americans to pursue their dreams, drive innovation forward, and do all the other things that make a society great, including making art. That's a great counter platform for what we're seeing. So I just wanted to, I was stirring in my chair trying to react to all those things. So thanks for allowing the space for the monologue.
Fire. Xander Schultz is on fire today, folks. Right there with you, man. I mean, look, let's stay on the screen together for this part, because what you just said, I think, is super relevant to our answer to the segment today. Who is joining the Defiance? Because we have a small business leader in Minneapolis, a screen printer, Art Price, that opened their screen printing studio to print ICE protest shirts for free, because we live in an age where you can make these things happen. You can make it happen fast. You can respond. And so, I thought a lot of what Jonathan Taplin today said was provocative, and we got to light the fire. And I think as he put that piece out in Rolling Stone this week, we are seeing that fire getting lit in places like Minneapolis. I want you to watch a clip about this, because the response from the community in Minneapolis has been overwhelming with these free ICE protest shirts.
I'm Art Price, and I am putting free prints on the shirts and other fabric that anyone brings us to print on. I decided to start doing this because I have this cooperative screen printing studio space that I run, and I didn't have a lot of shirts, but I had a lot of equipment and ink, and I was very, very angry. The response from the community has been absolutely incredible. I've had a group chat of volunteers more than 50 people deep. I have been able to arrange for people who don't feel safe coming to get a shirt to have a shirt taken to them. I've had folks donating time, money, food, everything. I've had people coming in bringing whistles. We've had people bringing by red cards to distribute to people as well. We've got cookies that had sprayed on them ice, just on the cookies. I have had some people show up in ways that I have never experienced before in my life. I have felt more in community in the last week than I have in the last 5 years. If someone wants to get plugged in and doesn't know where they fit, they should find a place where people are already doing something and talk to the people who are doing that. Just because you haven't done anything before doesn't mean you can't do anything. As Jake the dog once said, being really bad at something is the first step to being kind of good at something. And if you show up, they will put you to work. There's work to be done, and we will show up.
Okay, I love that. That guy is awesome. Things like that are totally worthy of the Who is Joining the Defiance segment. And I think, Xander, for people who are inspired, and Mercedes is going to tell me if I'm right about this, I think they can contribute to what he's doing by sending him money on Venmo. Mercedes, do I have it right that it's Great Grendel is his Venmo? Okay, so if you use Venmo, I'm going to put this in here. And while we're sitting here talking, I'm going to donate to this guy as well. His Venmo is Great Grendel. And he's making these shirts in Minneapolis for free, making sure that people are out there in their ICE protest swag. That is Awesome. Xander, let me get your take, and I'm going to simultaneously try to throw some coin his way.
Well, let's throw some Defiance coin his way. This is exactly why this group was created. I'm sure our Defiance members would want to fund that type of work. Here's what I'll say. In moments of crisis, you can step up and be a serious force, and people will gravitate towards you if you plant the flag. I wasn't even in politics 6 years ago. Unlike Miles, who, Miles, you've been an impressive person in this space for a long time. I really got involved 2019, 2020. Since then, the organizations I've started have moved $250 million towards pro-democracy groups. I wasn't a player in this space, but I was someone who wanted to convene people, stay focused on this, and drive action, and people gravitate towards that. And so, I'm sure this guy a year ago didn't think he was going to be the center of the resistance, but he was brave. He planted a flag, and look at all the energy gravitating towards him. And so the great thing about crisis, there's a lot of shitty things about crisis. The great thing about crisis is people gravitate towards bravery. We're able to show up for each other. We're able to build community in ways that are kind of hard in the 21st century. And this is just a fantastic example.
It totally is. I just donated personally. We had a suggestion in the chat that we do a Defiance donation too. I think that's reasonable if folks don't object to it. It won't be our grantee of the week, but I think we could give a Defiance grant to this guy. All in favor, hit the heart button or write it in the comments. And if so, we'll do a Defiance grant as well. So thrilled about that. I see the heart buttons going wild. So
how different is that, Miles, than the foundation strategies we're used to? How do you choose your grantee? Just by the amount of hearts we see flying up on the screen.
Yeah. Also, I gotta say, look, that's what's exciting about this moment is, like our members of defiance.org, we are not the slow, bureaucratic, let's spend 3 months figuring out what we're going to do about ICE. Hell no. We'll never, ever, ever be able to counter what these guys are doing if we don't act fast. So highlighting these things, are fantastic. Very excited to support people like that out there. And for every story like that, I mean, there are so many others that are so encouraging to people in their communities. I got to tell you, Xander, maybe there's a place for us to auction something like this off to go raise money for the cause. But my own wife, I went downstairs yesterday and she's a knitter. And I was like, Hannah, what are you knitting? She's like, I'm knitting a headband. And I was like, what does it say? And she said, it says fuck ICE. My wife, Hannah's she's not a crass person, at all. And there's my wife knitting a headband. And so I said, well, how long did it take you to do that? She said, it just took me 2 hours or whatever. And so I thought, wow, maybe at the State of the Union event that we're doing, I should try to enlist my wife and see how many headbands she can make in the lead up to it. And what's an absurd amount of money we could charge for them with people knowing that the money's going to go towards the cause. So anyway, you should join me in encouraging my wife to make those fuck ICE headbands to sell at the State of the Union event. But anyway, it's just it's so amazing to see people just everywhere rising up in this moment.
It is awesome. Are we in the Q&A stage, my friend?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We should take some questions before we go. Sorry, folks. I got so carried away with that segment. Okay. So it sounds like, yes, we should give a small Defiance grant to the great Grendel. And what questions do we have in the chat? Throw some questions in the chat for folks. Batya just sent $50. Rock on, Batya.
Oh.
Hannah's getting some love there in the chat. I can't wait. I hope she's watching right now. Someday she's watching downstairs and she's probably like, oh man, Miles, don't sign me up for that. Honey, sorry, I signed you up for it. Let's see. What other questions do we have today, folks? Can he print me up my own Nobel Peace Prize t-shirt? Sass Writer says we should send that in our note when we send the Venmo to him. Maybe. And also, this would be interesting, Xander. Let's see if we can get the great Grendel to do a guest t-shirt for our upcoming event. We were on a call earlier today. Idea. And in fact, I don't know, Mercedes, if you have the mock-up of the first piece of swag that we're going to put out there for the State of the Union event? Mercedes is saying, no, I do not have that. I think it might be in our text messages somewhere. I don't know if you're able to present it. But we can show people that. But maybe we should reach out to the great Grendel and see if he'll do a guest shirt for the event for us to sell as a limited edition. That would be really, really cool. Let's see. Other questions. Alice says, send a headband to Greg Bavino. That is a very good idea. You got it, X-Man?
I got it up. I think Mercedes has to bring it onto the stage, though.
No, I think I can add it to the stage.
Oh,
there it is, baby. That's the initial State of the Swamp shirt that's gonna, I think, go into our swag store soonish. That's got the lineup, the rebuttal to the State of the Union, all of that.
I love using them as a print shop. That's a brilliant idea, buddy.
Yeah, we totally should. If you guys think this is cool, also let us know in the comments, because we hope to get that one up, and that will also help fund the activation that we're going to announce around the event. So super excited about that one. Man, I love that shirt. I don't know if other people, I just love the vibe of that thing. Hats off to our we say we're a 3.5 person team, to our 0.5 team member, Scott Goodstein, for pulling that one together. That's a really cool one. I can't wait to be wearing that. Another question we've got, let's see, Jody asks, if the regime holds back funds to blue states, will it drag on in the courts for a long period, long enough to cause damage to those states? Jody, I think yes. I mean, that's why this thing is really, really alarming. Look, I want to level set for people. The thing Donald Trump is talking about doing to blue states is basically the same thing that he got impeached for with Ukraine. Go back in time to when Donald Trump got impeached on Ukraine. The impeachment was not about how he was a jerk to Ukraine and withholding their money. It was about how he was violating the law by not distributing money to Ukraine that Congress had said, you must spend this money on the defense of Ukraine. That's what he was impeached over. That was deemed an impeachable offense, is one discrete episode of the president withholding a few $100 million in aid. We are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars potentially that the president will say, I know that Congress told me I'm supposed to spend this on the states, but I'm withholding it from blue states. Let me just say very clearly to folks, this is an impeachable offense. Yes. This is an impeachable offense. You are watching a crime in progress. The White House is planning to do something. And you know what? I want us to say that loudly to this White House and have them know we're not missing the fact that you're committing another impeachable offense. And this time, damn it, we're going to make it stick.
We should, we were thinking about doing bingo for State of the Union, having all the cards be impeachable offenses that they've done thus far. Like you could have 100 bingo cards, no problem, with impeachable offenses that have been committed in the first year of office. It is absolutely wild. Miles, is there any, we've talked about this a few times, but I just want to brainstorm with you. Is there any way to get the rulings on this, the court rulings on this, expedited? It's such a dramatic, it has such a dramatic impact on the country, similar to the deployment of troops in our street. How can we shorten that window between Trump's action and the courts checking his action?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you didn't plan this question for me to say our organization has an answer, but our organization has an answer. Is we are teaming up with the best groups of litigators in this country to, as fast as they can, take these things to courts and sue up to the Supreme Court to get some of these issues adjudicated. And I know that people are skeptical about the Supreme Court's willingness to check this president. But on some of these issues, we are seeing signs that the court, including the conservative justices, are worried about the thing that I keep saying all the time, which is that Donald Trump is setting precedents that can be used easily by Democrats who come in. And you saw, I mentioned that earlier today, that Brett Kavanaugh, was pushing back against the administration's arguments about firing members of the Federal Reserve Board, saying the logic of your argument is that any president can fire anyone from the Fed whenever, and that's going to come back to bite you when a Democrat takes office. And the Trump lawyer said, well, it's not my job to speculate about what might happen in the future. And Kavanaugh interrupted and said, no, you don't have to speculate. Like, you just have to have eyes and ears to see this is what happens in American politics. You set a precedent and the next party takes it over. And that's just like during the Obama years when we saw, the encroachment on the filibuster, and now both parties are like, pretending the filibuster never existed. So I will just say, Xander, it cuts both ways. And back to the original point, we're funding the organizations that go out and do this work. One of them that we have backed is the Democracy Defenders Fund. Norm Eisen and team have been kicking ass in the courts and taking the Trump administration to task. And another person we're chatting with next week is Mark Elias, who's been doing extraordinary work on this front. And so, that's another thing that I get excited about every week in this community is we have the ability as a club to go out there and help supercharge these efforts. Or if there's a case that's of interest to us, go give a restricted grant to help fund that case and that effort. So that's something that we're going to keep doing, is making sure that we are doing what you say, Xander, and accelerating this stuff in the courts.
Fantastic.
I think that's the time we have for today, folks. We got to go do some winter storm prep over here in the Taylor household. And I'm sure a lot of you got to do the same. I'm like literally over here Googling, like, what could I possibly do to keep my pipes from exploding amidst all of this? So, yeah, we'll see. I might be flying out to Portland, man.
You're welcome into the Northwest. I was just about to beat you to it. Welcome to the Northwest if you need to get out of Dodge for a little bit.
People are going to tune in on Monday, and we're just going to be sitting actually side by side there,
It'll be too much without the split screen, just both Defiance hats.
It'll be too much.
Nice to see everyone, gang.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you for a great program. Thank you this week, folks, for being so energized and supportive. We had an amazing week. If you missed it, we had a fantastic weekly mission brief on Wednesday. Just so inspired by this community and everything that you have done. So as always, friends, stay loud, stay brave, stay together, and we will see you again Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on Defiance Daily.